again. This is supposed to be part 3 of the new bench amp, but I've reached a point, I guess I can show this. This is as far as I can go with this. Alright, everything has been installed except the four jacks. I think I've already gone over this. The problem is I'm out of parts and for those. So what I'm going to do is, and now I'll show you the old bench amp, and this is, oh my god, that's heavy. This is how it spent its life for the last, I don't know how many years. I have to steal some parts. I need these for those missing holes on the new board. Okay. I need the power amps, which are inside here, backed up by the heat sinks, and there's a pair of them, 2 mono ones. I'm not sure what they are. I think they're about 25 watts. They're integrated circuit powered. I need the speaker connectors and the fuse holders. So I started taking this apart and I thought, well, okay, I'll show you what this was and what this is before I really dismantle the whole thing. Now the power supply is massive. It's overkill, really. It's a big, huge power transformer for these little ICs. But I just happened to get them surplus many years ago, and they give me my plus minus about 35 volts that works for this. Okay, the problem I've had when using this with these power amps is that the input ground is somewhat isolated. There's a 10 ohm resistor in there, and because of that, when I use the same power supply and then these regulators in here, if I can show them, plus and minus 15 volt regulators, just 7815 and 7915. When I use them as well, it creates a hum, and it's noticeable. And the thing that I'm aware of, the original, where's the top? The original setup before I put these in was 2 flat pack power ICs mounted there and there. Now that's the top, right? And eventually they failed. They were ancient. SG Industries, I'm not sure, SG 1010 or SG 1020, really old original metal encased ICs. They worked fine with this. But when one failed and they were no longer available, I opted to replace both of them with these. And that's when I discovered this little hum problem because of that slightly elevated or isolated ground system. As of interest to absolutely nobody except me, this board was my first and close to my last foray into making PC boards. And what it is what is it? TL, gee, I forget what they are. TLO 74s, pardon me. And they are 4 op amps inside one, and they're FET. They were very popular in the late 70s, early 80s when I built this. And I built this, part of it, with wiring going out to off-board bass and treble controls. I built that for disco use. I think I mentioned that as well too. And when that stopped using and it sat there, I decided I needed a proper bench amp, and so here that is. So what it didn't have, and what I added externally, and what I'll be stealing these jacks for, is a break between the preamp and the power amp, so that the preamp can run out to a basic power amp only that I might have from a customer, and also to utilize the power amps that are in this if I happen to get a preamp that needs a power amp in order to test it, then I can do that in. But see, it's outboard, and it works, but it's not so good. And the other problem I had was this is my magnetic input. Two problems with that. One of which, when I wanted to test ceramic cartridges, to put them into aux input or tape input, because this is solid state and the basic input impedance is about 50,000 ohms, the ceramic cartridge and the changer sounded absolutely horrible. They were weak and they were tinny. So what I devised was this outboard jack system with plugs that I would plug into this that actually adjusted the gain or the signal strength of the ceramic cartridge and equalize it to some degree to fit into my magnetic phono input. But again, it was outboard and it was creaky and it didn't work. Plus, an annoying problem, I've had it apart so many times, was there is an open ground that happens intermittently in this mess that's inside here. Okay? And I could never find it. And I'd have it apart and I could never make it do any problematical stuff, and then I'd put it back together and it'd be all right for a few weeks, and then it would start again, and I'd get fed up with that. So if I'm testing a turntable that I've repaired or one that's for sale, and I hook it up and I put it on, all of a sudden it bursts into this big hum, then they're going to say, well, that's not right, you didn't repair the unit, or the unit isn't fit for sale. And I have to convince them that no, it's in my test amp. And that got to be very irritating, so it's done. So this power supply, oh my God, it gives about plus minus 35 volts, filtered, rectified and filtered output into here, which feeds these two power amps, and then the regulators down to plus and minus 15 volts on that. So they'll come out of here, and hopefully when I clear all this out, it'll fit into there, because I have to have a separate power supply for the preamp section on here because of that ground loop problem. And I looked to say, well, the heck with this, rather than replace, or at least adding a plus minus power supply for this, I'll find some Chinese pre-made boards that don't have that problem, and as far as I could look, they all seem to have that 10 ohm isolated ground situation, and so I might as well stay with the one I've got. Now I do have a pair. These ones don't have that problem. They're really small. They're what are they now? I've used these a number of times. They're great little op amps, power amps. Plus minus, I'm not sure what they take, maybe 15 volts, maybe 25 volts, and they're good for about 10 watts RMS per channel, and that might be fine, and I could use them here, I guess. But I've got these, and I don't crank the unit very often, but sometimes I'm in a mood to do it, so they wouldn't really suit. Not when I have an option of doing that. So my problem that I've got in fitting this into the new board, there's the back panel that is pristine, hasn't been manipulated at all. So I've got a pair. They're actually dissimilar. They're not quite the same. I thought I had two of these. But if I put two of them, pardon me, side by side, or the other one that's on the other side, which is even bigger, I don't have the room for anything else. I've got to fit jacks and speaker connections and fuse holders and power inputs and input RCA jacks there too. So they just won't go. So I've been scratching around looking. I've got one. This might be a possible thing to use. Now, what I have to do, I have no idea where this came from, is cut cut these flanges off, so I just have that. Then I have to drill holes because while the IC is mounted there, if you can see, there's a little, I don't know whether that's viewable, there's a nut in there. Now that doesn't have to be isolated, but it has to have space made for it. So for this one, which was originally for a TO3 transistor, I just drilled this out so there'd be clearance for that nut in there, and that was fine. So if I'm going to use this, I have to find a way to drill a hole right properly in the middle, and then mount that flush up against it. That might be. I've got a grinder, a metal cutter. This is aluminum, so it'll make a mess of it, but who cares? At any rate, I'm going to start taking it apart. I don't think there's any particular need to video that. It's going to be messy, and I've got to get the parts I need out of it to finish off, and then I've got to clear everything out of here in order to put the power supplies in here, and I'm hoping they'll all fit. If they don't, that'll be a wait, because what I'll do is order another one of these, and they come from China or wherever, and it'll take, I don't know, 6 weeks to get here, and I don't want to be without an amplifier on the bench for that long. At any rate, before this becomes history, I thought I would show everybody what's happening. So the next part, probably part B of part 3, so it's part 3B, will show this done. I've already done, I have to, there's something that I'm not showing the panel. There. What I have to do is, this will all be painted, but I have to, in order to mount, say this one, order to mount that there, the paint I feel is going to act like an insulator. So I have to take a wire brush on the drill and clean that all off so it's down to bare metal. And then I have to put some painter's tape, the same size of that, to cover it, so that when everything else is drilled and I paint it, I don't put more paint on this. So that has to be, and I guess I need to do the same with the back. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I did. I scraped away the paint on this on both sides so that there'd be a more intimate, I don't think that shows. There'll be a more intimate thermal contact between the heatsink and the metal case and the integrated circuit. So enough of my babbling. I'll go put you on hold or pause, and then I'll start ripping and tearing this apart. I'm getting a little desperate because it's now starting to be fall weather in southern Ontario, and I do need this to be at about 20 degrees in order to paint it. So if it's going to take any longer, I'm going to have to take some heaters out there to the shop, because I can't paint inside the house. It's too stinky and dangerous. I'll have to be able to heat up this and heat up the environment for a while I paint it. So not a big deal. I've had to do that before. Just depends on whether we have Indian summer at any particular time soon. I don't know. Anyhow, I'll be back soon. Good morning. Well, here I am still working on this bench amp, and it's coming along quite nicely. So what I thought I would do before I started having the final assembly put in, I'd show you what I've got, the back panel. Can't remember, it's been a few days since I did a last video on this, but there's the back panel. Missing 2 RCA jacks, which I'm totally out of stock, and I was hoping I'd receive them this week, and they haven't come yet. And that's unfortunate. So it means even though I put it in and start using it, I'll have to open it up again. It's not a big deal, but sort of irritating that I can't finish it off. Okay, I've got the fuses and the caps for the holders. There's my modified heat sink, and to show the inside, if I can show that through there properly. Get some more light on things. There's my scavenged power amplifiers that I took from the old unit, and I don't remember, I think they're maybe 25 watts per channel, something like that. More than sufficient for the purposes here. But I like them and they're fine. So what I found when I took these out, that I think I mentioned and complained about there being a slight isolation resistor between the negative or the common for the input of the amplifier to the actual ground. And while that's the case for some of the packages that I have, it's not the case here. So why I had the hum, I don't know. So what I've decided is to just use one power supply for the both, and I'll pay strict attention to shielding and see if I do no longer have that kind of a problem. Okay, with a little jiggy pokery, my measurements were a little bit off, but I've managed to mount these things very securely. They're held in place through the IC heatsink ground, or heatsink connection, I should say, bolted there, but also they're securely mounted through standoffs at the bottom. And the problem I had, typical me, when I measured where the insulators and the IC mounting package should be at, what was it, 30 millimeters, is that right? Up. When it did it, it wasn't. So whatever I had for standoffs, either the units were tilted up because the standoffs were too long, or they were tilted down because the standoffs were too short. And I'm going, I'm loath to have to re-drill this, because not only do I have to re-drill through this panel, I've got to re-drill right through the heatsink as well, which isn't a huge problem, but it was an irritant anyhow. So I came up with this situation where, and I don't know whether it shows, but this is all sort of brass standoffs and nuts. Can I get in there tighter? I don't know. Okay, brass bolt, brass standoff, brass nut, and then I found, because this is too short, that a little plastic nut, which is the same sizing, I think it's M3, mounts it just perfectly. So I fixed my boo-boo. Okay, and so all the wiring. Now there's another curious thing. All the power amps, mostly that I come up with, have the rectifiers and filters already part of it. So basically you just hook up your secondary from your transformers there. The center tap in the middle and each end goes there, and it takes care of it. However, because this is powering all sorts of things here, and I didn't want AC to come in to this case at all. The power supply I showed before, pardon my scraping, huge transformer and rectifiers and filter caps in this, and with some umbilical cord here and here will supply the signal, not the signal, the plus and minus to it. Okay, so a curious thing, as I'll get back to it, is if you supply plus and minus DC into your AC inputs of these things, really doesn't matter, because the bridge, as long as it has a bridge, the appropriate diodes will conduct and put the appropriate voltage on the appropriate capacitor and input to the IC, no matter which way you put it. Only two will conduct for that particular point. So, and I've done it before and it works very well. So, from the plus and minus input, which is about 35 volts, about 30 maybe, into a connector here, that's just a tie point, and from that each one is fed separately from a twisted pair. I'm not getting light where I want it. Twisted pair into each input, and also a twisted pair into this regulator, which also has, the regulator has a rectifier and 4 filter caps, and then the regulator ICs, the positive and negative, to give me plus and minus 15 volts out. Okay, so we're at that point. I've got some grounds to hook up. I've got the shielded wires to put in. I've got to find separate ones. And the output, can I back this off a little more? No, that's it. The output from the switches are all here, and they will go into the, these will go into the fuses, and then the grounds will go there. I'm trying to wire all grounds appropriately, and no ground hopefully will be in a loop situation which will cause hum. They all come back to this one point, which has been the tie point, which the center lug is negative, and it has had the paint scraped off the chassis, and a nice big bolt through there and there. So that's that chassis ground. Star point is what they call them for solid state stuff. I need to ground this panel and the front panel to that same point. As you can tell, this design is all held together with plastic front piece and back piece, and so that isolates everything. So in order to get a ground for proper shielding, I have to run wires in. Now the same thing's going to happen when I go to put the lid on. It will not be grounded. It goes, pardon my wire sticking out all over the place. Well, actually it goes there, but it touches that. So if I scrape away, pardon me, I'm not in frame, even though it's isolated that way, and touching the two painted surfaces will not accomplish a ground. So what I'll do is I'll put a, I'll drill it, scrape the paint, and put a nut and bolt in, which is going to be interesting. I can't put a nut and bolt in there because that will be sealed up. Well, I'll find something to do. Oh dear. Long gone are the Hammerlund and the various other manufacturers for all metal cases, like this one was. This is the top of the one that I took apart. It's all metal, and when it's bolted together, it accomplishes a ground. So here we are. This is all, this part's all wired, all ready to go. Oh, one exception, two exceptions. One, I've yet to establish where I'll have a ground from this to the chassis. In other words, to ground that. All the phono jacks are all isolated. They all have isolating washers, and they're all grounded in a separate situation. The inputs from the back here will be soldered to here, which is the input selector switch, once that's all in the case. And again, the third set of jacks will have to be put in there. And there's also one more big thing that I have not done, and my Chingies, I think I'm going to put it together without it, because I have to build a circuit on this perf board that will accomplish RIAA simulator, and it goes out on these jacks here for when I want to test an amplifier's phono input. Previously, I would have to grab a turntable and plug it in, hook it up, put a record on, and take up bench space, which is at a premium here, in order to test the input. With this, I can take whatever's being fed through, a CD, the tuner, any a test oscillator, anything, to run output to that, to feed into an amplifier under repair where the phono input is a problem. And that I like, because it's been real clunky having to have a turntable on the bench for that repaired. However, I've got the components, I have to put it together. I'll see how it goes. And then it will mount, it will mount there or there. I'll cut this piece off. I only need this part of it here. It's not that complicated. Seeing as how everything is standing up that way, I might mount it that way as well too. We'll see. I gotta do it. So I'm getting antsy. I don't have music on my bench and I need it. So that's the state. Oh, and one boo-boo. I knew I would make a boo-boo somewhere along the line. It's not huge, but when you're working on turntables, maybe 50% of turntables have a separate ground system from the deck and maybe the tone arm, all coming out to a ground wire that has to be hooked to a ground connection on your amplifier receiver. And I had meant to put a binding post. Well, lots of luck. There's precious little place for a binding post on here, and have a wire trailing down, maybe there. So, okay, what I opted to do was drill a hole, put a grommet on it, bring a wire up to the ground, center ground, which is there, and bring it out and put an alligator clip on it. So the wire will just hang down, sort of be in my way, can't help it, and when I need it, it just hooks up to the ground connection that comes out of the turntable. So, at any rate, I think every project needs one little boo-boo that you have to sort of figure around. Everything else, I have thought and thought and thought, and I have a pretty good handle on this being the last design, last unit that I will have to ever build for test amp purposes. And it will fulfill most of my needs. I will, however, build, as I've seen others on the internet, Manuel Caldera is one who has I think Mr. Carlson has his own version of it too. Just a little box with a little speaker and a little amplifier and a test probe that's run by batteries that can either inject a signal from an oscillator or receive a signal that gets amplified and passed on to the speaker. One of the reasons why I like that as opposed to firing up this is that it's battery powered, so it's isolated. It could be used on any kind of circuits, and you don't run the risk of damaging what you're working on, or your wonderful test amplifier. So I will build that. I've got a speaker, those little speakers that come with surround sound packages, like from Sony. The speakers are about yay big. In fact, I think I've got one right here that's being prepped for it. Yep, there it is. I've got so many of these things. Alright, so they're perfect. And inside is just a speaker and the mount, and I think I can make some little PC board that will go in there with a little amp and a little oscillator, put it together, find a way to jam some batteries in there, and have that with whatever I need coming out the top. I'll need a on-off volume control, RCA jack, and maybe a switch to switch it from oscillator mode to amplifier mode. Not a lot. It'll be a little cramped going in there because you've got these big studs that mount the speaker. At any rate, not a huge speaker, but not bad either. You know, these are surround ones meant for like 20 watts. What do we got here? Oh, they don't tell you. X watts. That's what it is. It's X watts. Okay. So that's it. Next, you'll see it mounted with a little bit of testing going on. And I'll fiddle around with it, tweaking up anything I need, and then I'll get back to you showing it up on the bench, and I'll say hooray, and maybe you'll say hooray along with me. So that's it for now. Take care. Thanks for watching. Well, finally, or almost finally, it's done enough at any rate, and it's up and running, and it's using the original power supply. So it looks just wonderful. I had all sorts of problems with it, mostly I don't know, my preamp, the phono preamp, which is the jacks right at the end there, I couldn't get to work, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I had a good look at it, and the parts that I were waiting for finally got in stock. I forgot to install them, and so therefore I had this thing mounted and everything, and it wouldn't work. And when I looked at it, there were a few slots where the resistors should go, and they weren't there. Oh, God. Other than that, when I got it all hooked up, I think I mentioned before, there was this persistent low-level hum. And I'm going, I don't know why. Manufacturers managed to use one power supply to power all aspects of their amplifier or receiver, but I couldn't manage to do that. And this goes back to the previous original bench amp. So I thought I'm going to have to put another power supply in that gives me plus or minus 15 volts. And then last night, when I couldn't sleep, I thought, well, okay, what if I isolate the output of the preamp section and the input of the power amp section? This preamp board that I'm using now has a lot of gain, really a lot more than what the power amp needs. So I just unsoldered the connection between the two and put a 100K, 100,000 ohm resistor in series, powered it up, and lo and behold, the hum was gone, or at least below audible levels. So I'm not sure exactly why that was the case, but it worked. So eventually I decided on 82K resistor in series, which gives me still a lot of volume. See if I can. I can go a lot higher than that, that's for sure. So it all works. Now I'm still waiting for the knobs to come in. They're still arriving. They haven't arrived yet. And I started putting labels on it, as you can see there, but I couldn't get it exactly straight. So I do have to take it apart again because I'm waiting for a pair of RCA jacks to go on the back, and so I'll just disconnect it. It's just a few things plugged in the back. So when I can put it vertically on the bench, then I should be able to do a better job of putting the labels on there. And then it's all ready to go. I'm so pleased. I'm sure everybody's just as pleased as I am that it's finished. And so this is really a wrap for this particular project. Now I can get on with other things that might be of better interest. So at any rate, thanks for those who watch, and everybody have a good rest of the day. Take care.